Over the past several years, few cases have continued to generate as much global attention as the scandal surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. Even after his death, the legal, political, and social aftershocks of the case have not faded. Instead, new developments periodically reignite public interest, especially when prominent or internationally recognized figures are pulled back into the spotlight. Now, renewed legal pressure tied to associates of Epstein is once again raising serious questions about accountability, cooperation with authorities, and whether further disclosures could reshape public understanding of the broader network connected to the case. One of the most closely watched figures in this ongoing story has been Prince Andrew. His previous legal controversies linked to Epstein generated intense media coverage in both the United Kingdom and the United States. While civil matters have been addressed publicly in the past, speculation frequently resurfaces whenever legal developments occur in related investigations. The central issue now is not simply about past allegations. Instead, it revolves around whether renewed investigative momentum, either domestically or internationally, could create new legal complications for individuals previously questioned in connection with Epstein's activities. Why this case never truly goes away. There are three main reasons this story continues to dominate headlines. 1. The scale of the original allegations. Epstein's case was not viewed as an isolated criminal matter. It was framed as a network involving wealthy, powerful, and globally connected individuals. Whenever a case includes elite figures, public scrutiny intensifies. 2. The unanswered questions. Many observers believe key details remain undisclosed. This perception, whether fully accurate or not, keeps public curiosity alive. Questions about associates, facilitators, and possible enablers still circulate in media analysis. 3. International dimensions. Because individuals connected to Epstein span multiple countries, any legal action abroad can potentially influence U.S.-based investigations. International arrests or court proceedings often trigger speculation about cooperation between jurisdictions. The legal pressure factor. In high-profile cases like this, legal pressure can take many forms: civil lawsuits, criminal investigations, cooperation agreements, subpoenas, financial audits.
In recent days, former Donald Trump has once again dominated headlines. But this time, it's about trade, tariffs, and a very public clash with the United States Supreme Court. What started as a legal dispute over the authority to impose tariffs has quickly spiraled into a nationwide debate about economic consequences, political strategy, and the broader implications for American consumers. The Supreme Court ruling and Trump's response. The Supreme Court recently struck down Trump's attempt to impose certain tariffs using the authority under the IPA, American International Protection Act. The court ruled that only Congress has the power to implement these tariffs, making Trump's unilateral action unconstitutional. Instead of accepting the decision, Trump escalated the situation dramatically. He announced that, using a different legal authority, he would raise tariffs from 10% to 15% on various countries, essentially bypassing the Supreme Court's ruling. This move was framed publicly as an effort to protect U.S. economic interests, but analysts widely interpret it as an act of personal defiance, aiming to assert control over the narrative and demonstrate his political strength. How tariffs affect American consumers. Although tariffs are technically levied on imported goods, the economic burden is ultimately shifted to American consumers. Companies importing products pass the increased costs on to buyers, leading to higher prices on everyday items. Analysts from institutions like Harvard Business School and Goldman Sachs have quantified this effect. By the end of this year, 55% of tariff costs will fall on U.S. consumers. Businesses will absorb about 22%, and foreign exporters only 18%. By next year, consumers could bear as much as 70% of these costs. The result? Everyday products, from toys and electronics to clothing and food, are seeing significant price increases, intensifying inflationary pressures. Inflationary concerns and economic fallout. Economic data shows that tariffs have tangible impacts beyond just consumer prices. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis and the Fed's Beige Book reports, tariffs contribute directly to inflation, particularly affecting durable goods. Other think tanks, including the Peterson Institute for International Economics and Yale's Budget Lab, warn that sustained tariffs could reduce overall U.S. economic output, increase general price levels, lower wages for American workers. The irony is that policies intended to make America great again in terms risk harming the very citizens they are purportedly designed to help. Political implications. Trump's tariff strategy also has significant political consequences. Republicans who had briefly been able to distance themselves from controversial trade measures now face renewed pressure. By escalating tariffs, Trump removed a temporary shield for members of his party, forcing them to defend unpopular economic measures or risk voter backlash. Congressional Republicans find themselves in a dilemma: comply with Trump's directives or oppose him and risk intra-party conflict. Analysts predict increased uncertainty and internal divisions, particularly as the 2026 elections approach. The strategy behind the tariff escalation. From a political standpoint, this aggressive approach aligns with a pattern Trump has exhibited in office and afterward, treating policy decisions as personal battles. The tariffs are less about global economic strategy and more about asserting dominance over perceived adversaries, including the Supreme Court. This pattern has several effects. Political messaging demonstrates strength to supporters, projecting an image of decisive leadership. Economic consequences shifts costs to consumers and businesses, which can trigger inflation and dissatisfaction. Legal tension creates potential conflicts with Congress, as legislative authority is required for certain tariff measures. The combination of these factors illustrates the complex intersection of policy, ego, and political theater. Historical context and precedent. Historically, U.S. presidents have imposed tariffs under various authorities, but legal precedent has often constrained unilateral action. Courts generally maintain that Congress holds the ultimate power over trade and tariff measures. Trump's attempt to circumvent this authority represents a direct challenge to that legal principle, prompting both constitutional and economic scrutiny. Economists argue that unilateral tariff hikes rarely achieve intended protective effects. Instead, they frequently lead to trade retaliation, higher costs for domestic consumers, and market uncertainty. In Trump's case, raising tariffs to 15% intensifies these risks, especially amid already rising inflation and global economic instability. Public perception and media coverage. Media coverage of the tariff escalation paints a stark picture. Americans face higher costs while political battles unfold over authority and legality. Public perception is crucial, as rising prices affect every household, from groceries and clothing to energy and consumer electronics. Analysts note that such economic measures can have immediate political ramifications, influencing voter sentiment in upcoming elections. Commentators emphasize that while tariffs are often framed as tools of national strength, the direct impact on everyday Americans is substantial. In this instance, economic theory, legal authority, and political theater collide, leaving the public as the primary party bearing the consequences. The broader implications. The tariff saga is more than a domestic economic story. It represents the intersection of law, politics, and governance. Key takeaways include the limits of executive power in trade and taxation, the potential for legal conflicts between branches of government, the role of economic policy in shaping voter perceptions, the influence of individual leadership style on national and global outcomes. Understanding these dynamics is critical for both citizens and policymakers, as the ripple effects of such decisions extend well beyond immediate headlines.
While the nation grapples with economic pressures from tariffs, another political storm is brewing, this time at the state level. Recent rulings from state Supreme Courts in Virginia and Utah have thrown Republican strategists into full-scale panic, highlighting deep fractures within the party and the broader implications for the 2026 elections. Virginia. Republicans blocked at every turn. In Virginia, the state legislature has been moving forward with a ballot initiative to redraw congressional districts, adding 4 districts favorable to Democrats. Republicans, fearing loss of influence, attempted to block this initiative through legal challenges. Initially, a conservative trial court in Tazewell County granted a temporary reprieve, siding with the Republicans. However, the Virginia Supreme Court swiftly overturned that decision, allowing the ballot initiative to proceed. This has frustrated Republican operatives, who now find themselves repeatedly trying to challenge the court's rulings without success. Analysts describe this as a persistent but desperate attempt to manipulate electoral outcomes through the judiciary rather than through genuine political competition. Utah. Gerrymandering and Supreme Court pushback. In Utah, Republicans attempted to fracture Salt Lake City into multiple districts to dilute Democratic voting power, a classic gerrymandering strategy. A state court ruled that such a division was unconstitutional, insisting that Salt Lake City remain a single contiguous district. Republicans escalated the matter to the Utah Supreme Court, which ultimately rejected their appeals. This ruling is significant because it ensures fairer representation for Democrats in Utah and highlights limits on partisan gerrymandering. Yet Republican officials are exploring ways to pack the state Supreme Court or amend the state constitution to circumvent such checks in the future, demonstrating the lengths to which they are willing to go to retain power. The role of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Beyond state-level battles, a major federal case looms that could reshape American elections, the Cala case concerning Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. If the Supreme Court rules in favor of Republican claims, it could effectively gut protections against racial and minority voter suppression, giving states wide latitude to redraw districts in ways that favor certain parties. Such a ruling would have profound implications for 2026 and beyond. States in the South and West could engineer districts to consolidate partisan advantage, undermining democratic principles and potentially disenfranchising millions of voters. Legal experts warn that this is a critical issue that requires public awareness and engagement. Republican desperation and internal chaos. The broader narrative from Virginia and Utah points to a party in disarray. Analysts note several patterns. Over-reliance on the judiciary. Republicans are increasingly attempting to manipulate election outcomes through courts rather than policy or voter engagement. Trump's influence. Former President Donald Trump continues to shape party strategy, often pushing aggressive, controversial measures that create political risk for other Republicans. Internal panic. Party officials are described as being in full-scale panic, uncertain how to maintain control amidst legal defeats and a politically energized opposition. The combination of these factors indicates that the Republican Party is prioritizing short-term power retention over sustainable political strategy, creating instability that could affect elections nationwide. Public perception and media narratives. Public perception plays a crucial role in these developments. Rising prices from tariffs and repeated electoral legal battles contribute to voter frustration and distrust. Analysts emphasize that voters are paying attention not just to policies, but also to political behavior, particularly the apparent disregard for democratic norms and procedural fairness. Media coverage, including independent outlets like Democracy Docket, plays a critical role in informing the public. These organizations focus on transparency in voting, election law, and judicial oversight, helping citizens understand the stakes of legal battles in Virginia, Utah, and beyond. Broader implications for 2026. The combination of economic strain from tariffs and political turmoil in key states sets the stage for a contentious 2026 midterm election. Key takeaways include economic discontent. Tariffs and rising costs could influence voter sentiment, particularly among moderate and economically sensitive constituencies. Judicial impact. State and federal court decisions will shape the electoral map, potentially influencing which party has an advantage in various districts. Voting rights. Pending federal cases, especially around Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, could redefine who is able to participate in elections and under what conditions. Understanding these factors is critical for predicting election outcomes and for citizens who wish to engage meaningfully in the democratic process. Strategic takeaways. Legal battles matter. Courts are not just passive arbitrators, they actively shape the political landscape. Republican losses in Virginia, Utah, and other states demonstrate the limits of partisan influence when challenged in court. Voter engagement is essential. Policy alone will not secure electoral success. Mobilizing voters, protecting rights, and ensuring transparency are central to democratic outcomes. Long-term implications. Attempts to manipulate elections, whether through gerrymandering, voter suppression, or judicial packing, have lasting consequences beyond 2026, affecting trust in institutions and the legitimacy of government.